Well, thank you so much. People who know me well know that there's nothing I actually love more than talking to audiences like this. So maybe at some point I'll get an advanced degree so I could be a teacher, like so many of you want to be. But just full disclosure, I just have a history degree from 1977 from Carleton College and have been thinking about public policy and public affairs ever since. This is my one takeaway message. Everything I'm going to tell you today is this. If you only learn one thing from our talk today, this is what I want you to tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your mother, tell the politicians who represent you at St. Paul, tell the governor in a letter. This is the message of the conversation today. I actually got prepared some notes, but you know, the reason it's inevitable is because it's abundance. It's highly beneficial. It has implications for society long term. It has implications for consumers and ratepayers long term. And we're going to spend some time trying to establish the argument that this isn't just a good idea. This isn't just a positive step forward. This is an inevitability, and we should either capture it or miss the boat. I don't want to talk to you about Germany today, because everybody, when they give solar energy talks, they talk about Germany. But if I were here in a classroom in Germany and talking about increasing the amount of solar energy we have in Germany, I would be talking how to get from the 30,000 megawatts we have currently online here in Germany, how to get up to a higher number. Admittedly, Minnesota is only 1/10 the size of the German economy, so that means that I would be here talking to you about how do we get from the 3,000 megawatts of solar energy we have in Minnesota up to a higher number. Today in Minnesota we have 13 megawatts of solar energy, not 3,000, which would be our per capita share. What is it about Ulm, Germany that is so much more wonderful and beneficial for solar energy than New Ulm, Minnesota? New Ulm, Minnesota's solar resource is much, much better than Ulm, Germany. Where is solar energy a good idea? Where does it work? It works wherever plants can grow. That's a good way to think about how much sun is enough, how good a solar resource would I need, where would it might be economic someday. Wherever plants will grow. If plants will grow, that's a good place for solar energy. It's a big idea, right? There's enough sun to have plants grow. There's enough sun for economic solar energy. It's also massively distributed technology. That's jargon that energy geeks talk about as distributed technology. Solar energy is massively distributed. It's distributed everywhere. It's distributed across the whole planet Earth. Compared to our centralized energy system, which is 3,000 megawatts in Becker, Minnesota, solar energy is massively distributed across Minnesota. So it's the ultimate distributed generation technology. In fact, it is the very, very, very same resource, solar energy, which drives the entire agricultural economy. And the whole state is just a solar energy industry. The whole agricultural economy, the whole forestry economy, the whole ecology of Minnesota is a solar energy industry. That's what it is, the sun. So when I say that solar energy is infinite in supply, I mean actually that it's infinite in supply. As opposed to all the fossil fuel interests, all the fossil fuel, that was a Freudian slip, all the fossil fuel resources, all the fossil fuel resources that are all finite in supply. The natural gas industry now loves to go on and on about how we have 100 years of supply of domestic natural gas in the United States of America, and truly it is an amazingly bountiful and abundant natural resource. It's an amazingly bountiful resource. But according to the best scientific estimates, we have about a 5 billion year supply of solar energy. For the purposes of utility resource planning, for all practical purposes, that is an infinite supply. Now, the fact that it's an infinite supply of energy means that the competition in the industry to capture market share is absolutely intense, because all the companies that are playing in the solar energy market know that it's an infinite supply and know that it is inevitable and know it's going to be a massive global market. And if they can capture 1% market share, they will be an enormously, fabulously wealthy interest to capture 1% global market share of solar energy. These companies, these global solar companies, these companies investing in manufacturing of solar, what they know is that solar energy has rock bottom running costs. Solar energy running costs aren't low. Solar energy running costs are almost unimaginably low. They are as absolutely close to zero as you can possibly be without actually being zero. That's how low the running costs of solar energy are. So the next time that someone says to you, wow, solar energy is really expensive, ask them, really? What would be the running cost over 30 years? What would be the running cost over 30 years? And the little company that's manufacturing solar panels up on Mountain Iron, their little competitive advantage is that they argue that their solar panels are durable without any degradation in performance over 50 years. And a politician this morning corrected me, said, no, 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 it's over 100 years. I was like, I don't think you have the data to support that. But whether it's 50 years or 100 years, a solar panel that has virtually no operating costs over 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, its operating costs are essentially zero. Even wind power, whose operating costs are incredibly low, you have to go up and tighten bolts, you have to go up and change parts, you have to go up and grease them, you have to climb the ladder. Ladders are 22 stories high, that requires labor. So wind energy operating costs are incredibly low, but solar energy costs are practically zero. This is where solar energy earned its stripes. In technologies where the alternative to solar energy was an unimaginably long extension cord. The space program is where solar energy was invented, and it essentially beat out nuclear power in a neck-to-neck competition is who could power spaceships and satellites more economically. But the solar energy that was invented in the 50s and 60s was a phenomenally high-tech technology at phenomenal cost, because it was practically impossible to run an extension cord to outer space as it orbited the Earth. So that was the beginning of solar energy. And it's been tested in all the most severe and extreme conditions on the planet: space, ocean, remote industrial applications, tops of mountains, wilderness sites, by the side of the road. And if paired with a very expensive battery, today's rooftop solar can be more reliable than the most sophisticated power plant that's ever been engineered. The simplest solar panel is more reliable than the most sophisticated power plant that's ever been engineered. So we have an infinite supply with phenomenally low operating cost, as close to zero as not actually being zero, and reliability that's unparalleled. Well, solar energy costs so much, though. That's the problem. Solar energy costs so much. I asked my staff, standing in the back of the room, I asked my staff to find me some cost curves on solar energy that makes the point. And here's estimates of how solar energy would be dropping in costs. And the red line is the estimate that was made in 2008. The yellow line is the estimate that was made in 2009. The blue lines were made in 2010 and 2011. And then the pink line was an estimate that was made in 2012. So in every single year, the cost curve estimate of the manufacturing cost of new solar panels, they had to redraw the line because the line from the prior year was no longer relevant because the technology was improving fast enough that the 2009 line was no longer relevant in 2010. And what's amazing about this slide is that in most years, the actual cost, the bar charts, the actual cost beat the estimate from the prior year. It's even more phenomenal if I show you cost curves over 50 years. You know, cost curve from 1960 to 2010. It's like a rock dropping. The costs are dropping so fast. So if you're in the utility business, or you're in the, if you're in any business, you can recognize that solar energy represents reduced costs over time. And there are a number of values that solar energy has that aren't necessarily captured in a number of values, a number of benefits, a number of attributes, a number of performance characteristics that are unique to solar energy that are not captured by the market. Any economists in the room? These would be what I would call positive externalities, things that are really valuable, but the price isn't actually paid. They're not actually paid what they're worth. And let's just give you some example. The fact that the solar panel is generating electricity on site means that there are no transmission lines that have to be built. That's an avoided cost. It means that there are no distribution losses or line losses. The electric grid loses about 7 to 8% of all the electricity transmitted over the electric grid is just lost. Just, you know, the buzz off the lines is lost electricity off the lines. We're getting it from the wind farm in North Dakota to this computer right here. It'll be about 7% losses. So that's eliminated. By putting the solar panel right at the place where the power is needed, it actually frees up transmission capacity for other power to move. It basically makes our transmission system more cost effective by kind of taking load off the transmission system, allowing the infrastructure, the fixed asset infrastructure, the sunk cost, to get more electricity through. So it raises the value of the electric grid. It almost always is available on peak demand. What we mean by peak demand is, you know, August 4th, humidity is 92%, temperature is 92 degrees. That's peak demand in Minnesota, and it's probably sunny. So solar energy is always available on peak demand, and so it should be looked at compared to other technologies that are used to supply peak demand, which is like a diesel boiler, a diesel generating running fuel oil that the municipal utility might have in the back shed that they just use like on eight days a year, or the natural gas generator that is built for operating 5% of the time. Those are peak technology resources, and solar energy has to compete with the cheapest, dirtiest coal, but it's actually more valuable than the most expensive, highest quality peak generator because it's always available on demand. Or not on demand, it's always available on peak. See my point about that? So we're just adding up these values of solar that aren't reflected in what solar gets paid. It actually reduces the spot prices of the wholesale market, benefiting all the retail utilities in the entire grid and all the ratepayers by reducing the marginal aggregated demand on peak. Now, that is the most technical thing I'm going to say, and I apologize for it. I'm not going to repeat it. But somebody in the room understood what I just said. It also provides some ability for the grid to be hardened because the utility would otherwise have to pay for those stiffening or hardening or improvement of the grid that they basically would get for free because somebody put solar panels on their building. I love this quote from Marvin Kelly. Anybody a historian of science who knows who Marvin Kelly is? He ran Bell Labs during the peak of innovation back in the 1940s and the 1950s, and he had a very, very simple test to answer the question, well, whether should a new technology be integrated into a system? Incredibly simple test. And you know, they were a wire-based you know, utility, like an electric utility. They make, you know, Bell Labs, who they were. And he said that if we are going to integrate a new technology into our system, it has to have one of two characteristics. It either has to be better, or it has to be cheaper, or it has to be both. Well, I think there's not much debate about whether solar energy is better. I don't think I have to persuade the audience that solar energy is better. So that would satisfy Mr. Kelly's test right there on that grounds alone, that solar energy is better. But what I'm now going to try to persuade you is that solar energy would be cheaper as well, and that that too is an inevitability, that solar energy would be better and cheaper. Stephen Chu, the outgoing Secretary of Energy, who I deeply admire, and one of the most moving speeches I ever saw was see him explain to the Genius Conference out in St. Peter a 45-minute explanation of the science of global warming in 2007. And I thought, wow, if that guy could be Secretary of Energy, you know, he's Secretary of Energy. How about that? He said last week that solar energy would be the cheapest form of generation technology, electric generation technology worldwide within 10 years. So by 2023, solar energy would be the cheapest way to make electricity on planet Earth. And that's Secretary of Energy Stephen Chu. Now the problem is that it's going to be cheapest way to make electricity in some places before others. It's going to be cheapest in the sunniest place first, like Arizona. But it also has another variable, is competing against what? So solar energy is currently competitive in New Jersey, but solar energy is not competitive in Missouri, because electricity prices in New Jersey are twice what they are in Missouri. So we have two variables. How sunny is it, and how much does the market price for electricity in that location? And Minnesota is about so-so on both fronts. Our sun is better than Houston, and it's not as good as Phoenix. So we're about so-so in the middle. And on the prices of wholesale prices of electricity, we're actually much better than a lot of places. Electricity costs are cheaper here. So we're sort of on the not on the front leading edge of where solar energy can be cheapest, fastest. We're more in the middle of the pack. But to have a politician say, well, why don't we wait until solar energy is cheapest? I mean, to me, that's just the wrong question. Why don't we get started when it's still a little bit more expensive, so we have an industry, so we can get some, you know, some of these jobs and economic opportunities, so that when it is cheapest, we have 15 companies in this town that are billing $40, $50 million a year in solar energy installations by 2020, within 5 years, by 2018. This one is just a little over the top for me, but I left it in. Solar energy is not a perfect technology. It's not free. It's not magic. It has some downsides. It has some technical barriers. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But the downsides of solar energy do not include frying the planet, do not include accelerating drought cycles, do not include severe weather events. Apparently, a professor here showed that we had 3,000-year rainstorms in Minnesota this decade. 3,000-year rainstorms this decade. Does not include extinction of plant and animal species worldwide, and does not include the submergence of a country like Bangladesh. Solar energy has problems, but none of those problems accrue. This is what I tell the politicians. People really love solar energy. Credit Jenna Wade, my communication staff. That is a cool photograph. People love solar energy. I have, for those political geeks in the audience, especially one over there who was a state legislator who I wish she was there running some of our bills this year. This is how much people love solar energy. We asked them in the first week of 2013, we asked 600 Minnesotans a question. I'm roughly paraphrasing, but I actually have the exact question. Some people have proposed, I'm not paraphrasing, I'm reading it verbatim. Some people have proposed requiring that Minnesota get at least 10% of its electricity needs from solar power by the year 2030. Does this sound like something you would favor or oppose? People favor it. 70%, 74% favor it. 24% oppose it. And what pollster is really, really looking for is what percentage of the people who favor it strongly favor it? Because if I say to you, do you favor ice cream on Sundays? And you're like, yeah, I favor that. And they're like, well, do you strongly favor it? Like, yeah, I strongly favor ice cream on Sundays. This is a terrible example. But what we're looking for is the people who strongly favor it, because that means no matter how much advertising or how much firepower the other side throws at this in terms of advertising and persuasion and lobbyists, 40% of the people are completely unmovable. And another 34%, they somewhat favor it. So I never look at the fact and say that 3/4 of the people support it. I say 40% strongly favor of it, and 34%, they somewhat favor of it. Because I know that in an unlimited advertising buy, that 34% can erode, and my support can go down. But it will never, ever go down below 40%. And the people who oppose it, the strongly oppose it, are 14%, and the people who somewhat oppose it are 10%. I have a slide with all these, but we have wonderful what they call crosstabs in polling. So I can tell you how many Republican women in the 1st Congressional District, how they feel, and Democratic men on the Iron Range. I know all those answers. And the thing that's amazing is that solar energy is supported across party lines, it's supported across gender lines, it's supported across geographic lines. Solar energy is more popular on the Iron Range than it is in the Twin Cities. That's a good start for a political fight. So why don't we get busy? It's a hard problem. Changing out our electricity system has been compared to rebuilding an airplane while it's flying. This is a very, very hard problem, rebuilding an airplane while it's flying. I mean, just think of this electricity system. You have 16,000 megawatts of electric generation serving Minnesota and 16,000 megawatts of demand, and they both go up and down all the time, but they always have to equal each other exactly every second of every day. And that has to be managed by a team of people looking at computer screens as large as this room, so that every single day, every single hour, every single minute, and every single second, the total amount of energy being generated and the total amount of energy being consumed are identical. And so we want to put this crazy system, crazy technology in the system that when a cloud goes over it, it'll drop its output by 40%. And then we want to put this other crazy technology in the system that sun comes up and the wind power comes up, and then this weather front passes and the wind power dies down. So changing out our system from one based on fossil fuels to solar energy and wind energy is an incredibly wicked problem, incredibly technically challenging problem. But the genius of engineering and electrical generation is totally up to the task of changing out our electricity system to renewable energy. They are totally up to the task. And numerous studies have shown this is doable. There's a lot of problems getting solar energy into the mix. We had a guy look at this for 9 months. And these are all the barriers: utility practice, the structure of the industry, the transaction costs, financing options, economies of scale, ownership models, commercial net metering, standards, economics, residentials. I mean, solar energy, you say, I want solar energy. Well, what do you want? You want solar energy on the garages up and down your alley? Well, that's one business model. Oh, no, you want solar energy on all the Targets and Best Buys? Oh, that's a different business model. Oh, you want solar energy on all the brownfields and the unused land and in between all the runways at the airport for, football fields and football fields and football fields of solar energy? That's a different business problem with a different set of market barriers. And these are all the barriers that we identified that needed to be addressed in order to solve this wicked problem of changing out the airplane parts while the plane is flying. These are all the problems that need to be addressed. And I'm actually not going to read any of them to you or explain any of them to you, just tell you we thought about them all. But we found that there's solutions to all the problems. new laws, new better markets, better financing, reducing transaction costs, rulemaking, rate making, process, engineering, economics, reducing installer costs, knocking down red tape, getting government out of the way, getting the utility out of the way. All of these problems are solvable. But it's a wicked problem. It is not a simple, straightforward problem. It is a wicked problem with many, 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 many variables that society is going to have to agree on, the policymakers are going to have to agree on, the citizens of Minnesota are going to have to tell the policymakers, we have to agree on this, or these problems are not going to be solved, because it is a wicked problem. We used a cross-disciplinary approach when we looked at the barriers, and we looked at the problems, and we looked at the solutions. We used a cross-disciplinary approach. We talked to the smartest electrical engineers in the country. We talked to the smartest Public Utility Commission members in the country. We talked to the smartest solar energy finance business leaders in the country. We talked to the smartest ma and pa business in California who put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of home solar energy installations. We talked to as many people as we could possibly talk to. And then we wrote 5 pieces of legislation, put them into 2 bills. And they're currently being heard in the state legislature last week and next week. This is all teed up to move through the legislature, to the floor of the House, to the floor of the Senate, to the desk of the governor in the next 60 days. It's all teed up. We're all ready to do this. But this is the one word that answers all of the problems, summarizes all of the solutions, summarizes all of the fixes, is we have to get started. We have to deploy solar energy now. If we wrap every idea that is in all of these bills around one word, this is the word that solves the problems and drives down the costs, creates markets, reduces transaction costs, builds an industry, creates jobs, creates profits. We have to get started. We have to deploy. I like this word too because this is the way, this term is actually a term of war, is deployment. Marshal your resources. Figure out what assets you need, what assets you have, what's your objective. This is a term that means we have to get busy, all hands on deck, and clear the obstacles and barriers and choose the best solutions and move forward in a unified way. Yesterday morning at the state capitol, we had a podium that represented the voices of 35 policy groups and environmental groups, 100 solar and wind businesses, 5 labor unions, and we all have agreed on exactly the right policies tools to get the job done. We've all agreed. 100 businesses, 35 energy and environment groups, 5 labor unions have all agreed on exactly what the right policy tools are to get the job done. And we all agreed the one word is deployment. Now this is the what do you call this technology? What do you call it? What is it? A word cloud. Yeah, of course it is a word cloud. Just that left my brain for a moment. This word cloud represents all the ideas in our bills. And I'll just let you look at them because I'm not going to explain them to you because you're actually not that interested right now. But the policy nerds in the audience are welcome to go online, download the bills. They're both Representative Will Morgan in the House of Representatives has both big bills, and Senator Chris Eaton. Representative Will Morgan is from Burnsville. Senator Chris Eaton is from Brooklyn Center. They both have both bills, and these are the ideas in the bills. All these ideas passed into law will solve all the wicked problems or be a dramatic, significant step towards solving the wicked problem. And we have all the language, and we talked to all the experts, and now it's being vetted in the crucible of public policy debate, where somebody has an amendment to approve that idea, and the governor says, I like this idea less, I like this idea more. So what we propose is not going to become law as we proposed it. It will be dramatically a change to accommodate interests, and accommodate industries, and accommodate electric utilities. But amazingly enough, when Xcel Energy first testified this year on solar energy, their tone was very much, we want to be part of the solution. It was very much their tone. They didn't say, I'm ready to support this bill. They said, we want to be at the table. We want to solve this problem. We want Minnesota to be boldly in the solar energy business. We can ask if you want to take a note or something on this slide interests you. We can talk about it in the Q&A. I'm very close to the end of my presentation. Actually, I am at the end of my presentation. So I guess in conclusion, I should always write the concluding slide so I actually know how to finish the statement. That's actually one trick speakers always have, is know the last sentence you're going to say and then find your way to it. So that's a tip. So I don't have my last sentence, but what I want to say is that you know, this journey, it's this journey of thinking about the problem of solar energy. It really started 3 or 4 years ago. A young activist came to my office and said, you know, our organization, our national organization, wants to sort of start a Minnesota chapter. And you know, we actually think there's a lot of crowded environmental voices and energy policy voices. Do you think that our organization should have a Minnesota chapter? I said, well, I don't know. That's up to you. I wouldn't tell you yes. I wouldn't tell you no. I just told you there are 35 organizational members of this coalition, sort of a crowded field. And I said to her, why don't you pick something no one is working on at all? She said, well, like what? I said, how about solar energy? That was about 5 years ago. And that young woman and the person who replaced her literally built the coalition for starters, and then formed larger coalitions and larger campaigns with more interests in distributed generation and energy efficiency and increasing the renewable energy standard and advancing our wind energy goals. And solar energy now is a very mainstream conversation at the state capitol because of the people who followed up on that young activist who came to my office, you know, like 24, 25 years old, saying, what do you think we could work on that would be useful? And I said, you know, nobody in the whole field is actually doing any serious work on solar energy. And so Fresh Energy has contributed a lot, but I want to acknowledge the Solar Energy Industry Association. I want to acknowledge the Minnesota chapter of the Solar Energy Industry Association. I want to acknowledge the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, done a tremendous amount of work on this for a long period of time. I want to acknowledge Environment Minnesota and their leader, Ken Bradley, who's transitioning at the end of this week to a new venture, who helped bring this policy topic forward. I want to acknowledge the Minnesota Environmental Partnership, who got all the other environmental groups to focus on solar. And I do want to embarrass Ross Abbey in the back of the room, the Fresh Energy staff who's been thinking about solar energy every day, all day since August of last year. Thank you, Ross Abbey.